Thank you, Julie. So excited to be here, and I am thrilled to be with this panel. We have talked a lot about service and storytelling and belonging and how important that is. And these folks here have worked hard to put exhibits together that do all of that, bring people together, focus on service, create a sense of belonging. And so they're the on the ground practitioners and want to have a conversation with them to pick their brains and learn from them. So we have two educators. We have JoAnna Arnold from Americus, Georgia. We have Deborah March from Fairfax County. And we have Addison Drinnon, a senior at Furlow Charter School. And finally, we have Patrick Rogan, who is an amazing designer. He is with a nonprofit design studio that focuses on helping institutions and communities tell their stories. Let's give them a round of applause.
So I thought we would start with JoAnna. She has an incredible story to share, and I'm not going to speak. I want to hear from you. Tell us about your students and the work that you have done in Georgia.
Well, thank you. I'm JoAnna Arnold, and I come to you from South Georgia. That would be the city of Americus and Sumter County. In 2023, I was presenting at NYLC conference in Franklin, Tennessee, and then Congressman Baird was the keynote. And so I was just enthralled with this idea of his vision to bring museums to the communities across the United States. So I was presenting right after lunch on one end of the conference center, and he was at the other end. So as soon as I could finish up, I gathered my things and I went as fast as possible to where he was presenting, because I wanted to know more. And this is what he said that I remember: that there are people who serve, there are people to serve, and there are people who can serve. And that is what resonated with me, that my students at Furlow Charter School in Americus, Georgia, could be part of that servant leadership, but also a message of peace. And peace means different things to different people. But at Furlow Charter, I was part of the service learning program, and it was my job to bring opportunities to the students to create a culture of peace and provide these opportunities for them to serve. But also, it was not just the students, it was for the teachers. Furlow has done an amazing job. There's 600 students, 10 years, that they were founded among, with the principle of service learning. That was ingrained from the beginning in the students. That's K-12. And today we have 3 exhibits that we've brought for you, and I'm going to let Addison share a little bit more about what we're doing there. My job now, I don't work for Furlow anymore. I work with Furlow at Chattahoochee, Flint, RESA, and that's a regional education service agency. So now I get to take this message to 17 counties in Southwest Georgia. And my job as wraparound specialist also means that I get to address non-academic barriers. We have an advisory council of students from these 17 counties, and they have come together. They've heard this message about the National Center and Museum for Service, and they are very excited to learn more. Furlow has been doing amazing things, but it's because of the students. It's because of the vision of the leadership and their commitment to that. And so, like I said, we are happy to share. Thank you.
Thank you, JoAnna. And on that note, I want to turn it over to Addison, who is a senior at Furlow Charter. And you took on a leading role in helping to put together this community museum of service. And you selected Rosalind Carter to recognize. And I want to hear a little bit more about that and a little bit more about the butterfly garden that you set up.
Thank you. So for my service learning project, I wanted to focus on environmental sustainability, specifically the lack of habitats for pollinators in South Georgia. And Rosalind Carter has her butterfly trail that has a trail of butterfly gardens all up our state. And I wanted to add on that aspect of her work to our school. And I was inspired by her community leadership and I wanted to thank her for that through our first banner and acknowledge something that a lot of people may not know about her through our museum.
Incredible. And bringing that butterfly garden to your school, connecting your school to Rosalind Carter continually, in addition to the museum that you helped to set up. Amazing. I want to move on to Deborah March, who is a teacher at John Lewis High School. And just want to hear a little bit more how you brought service into your classroom.
Thank you. So, as the manager of the John Lewis Leadership Program, it's my honor to collaborate with the students, the staff, the families, and community partners to figure out how to bring hands on learning about leadership, justice, service, and advocacy to all of Lewis High School's 1,640 or so students, and give them opportunities to put their values into action to create the change that they hope to see. At Lewis High School, we believe that service is for all students, and especially students who are multilingual, students who have disabilities, students who are newcomers to this country, students who don't see themselves as change makers, who wouldn't sign up for a leadership program. When you're a school who commits itself to service for all, and not just for the service for students who can identify a service opportunity, drive themselves to it outside of school, but really service for all, you become a school that's committed to transforming itself from the inside, to transforming what the ordinary school day looks like, and to transforming it with the needs and interests of the students at the heart. So that's been really exciting for me because it means that our students, as part of English language development or world history or health and PE, that they are taking action. They're putting their learning from those classes into action in meaningful ways. And I think as educators, one of the most important things we can do is give our students personally meaningful, serious, sustained opportunities to create the change that they hope to see. And that, those projects look different, but they all start the same way at Lewis High School. They start with students reflecting on their values, figuring out who they are, what they care about, and then taking a community inventory. And that can be as simple as taking a community walk. Our students of all ages, design field trips for staff and students. They identify places in the community where they feel strong, where they feel empowered. And they also identify places in the community that reflect our needs, some of our opportunities for growth as a community. And then they take us there and they tell us, right? They tell us what they see. We talk, we share perspectives. And at that stage as educators, we're kind of researchers of the students' curiosity and passion. We're trying to notice what's sparking. We don't come into it with in health and PE, we're going to do a service project on this. So sometimes it takes weeks and weeks to really listen to the students and see what's sparking. And last year, a lot of different things sparked, food was a big spark. I'm a parent of adolescents, so I guess food is not a big surprise that it was a big spark, but the students had a really nuanced understanding of, that our community has a need. There is hunger in our community. And food is also an opportunity in our community for people to come together, to gather. And especially for our community where there's so many immigrants, so many newcomers, a site that is devoted to food, it becomes a gathering place and a spot for connection and for so many of our strengths to flourish. So those students, once that spark happened, that's where I'm able to get into action with community partners like all of you in the audience and say, my kids are interested in food. The Workforce Innovation and Skills Hub in our community came. They taught our students carpentry. Some master carpenters came out. Arcadia Farms came and taught our kids sustainable agricultural practices. Our kids interviewed their families. Our kids interviewed younger folks. We went to the elementaries and just tried to find out what are the food needs. Something that really emerged is some folks, the food is connected to their culture and that longing for that dish, that fresh produce that they can't get at Giant Supermarket. that they miss so much, and it's connected to their homeland. Our kids, during the school day, built more than 100 garden beds and built a community farm that you can come and visit along Route 1 right now to address the food desert in Springfield. So it's been a really powerful way to show that young people have the answers, right? The young people's perspectives are vital if we want to solve the most pressing problems of our world. And our service exhibitions are really a place to show everybody in the community what young people can do.
So beautifully said, Deborah. And it's so inspiring to hear the ways that you're opening doors to younger people to connect with service in a meaningful way that matters to their communities. Fabulous. So, Patrick, I want to turn to you because the question is, how do you take these amazing inspirational stories and turn them into exhibits? And I just want to say, Patrick helped us with the exhibits that you see on the stage and the exhibits outside. And we gave him a challenge, which was we needed exhibits that were inspiring, we needed exhibits that were inclusive and that were relevant to the community and yet affordable and portable. So he had his challenge put before him and he handled it beautifully. So we'd love to hear from you. What do you recommend to people considering, when they want to create an exhibit that's meaningful?
First of all, I just think what we've done here, just creating these very humble exhibits, but filled with vibrant stories, is really a model for the process. And I go back to when I was invited into this conversation. Congressman Baird really offered a vision, so that's where we all start, right? And one of his visions, or an interpretive approach to telling these stories, was to honor the past, honor people who have given service of themselves for their communities selflessly for others, but also to challenge our audiences to participate. And for me, in recent years, what I feel like all my projects are connected, but what's sort of led me here is working with the Anacostia Community Museum and DC Public Libraries. And actually, this forum is a product of that collaboration that we brought into this conversation. And a few years ago, we did an exhibition called A Right to the City at the Anacostia Community Museum. And just an example of how we discover the stories is we happened to do some research. Dr. King had been in Washington, D.C. in the Shaw neighborhood in 1967. And he was speaking about urban renewal, which was our primary story. In the ABC News archives, we discovered some footage that had never been digitized, hadn't been seen since he spoke here. And his refrain in his brilliant speech was prepare to participate. And so that's what I see, that energy, that passion that's in this conversation and all these successful projects that you're talking about. As I think of Addison's work, I think your project also reflects the multi-layered narrative experience. There are so many ways into your project, through an iconic figure such as Mrs. Carter, through our connection to nature, through your community, through your imagination and your creativity. I think that's a project that is something that we all can use as a model for what I describe as creative activism. So I think these exhibitions that you see, as simple as they appear to be, they reflect this larger conversation that are all these individual inspired voices, and a challenge, as Congressman Baird said, for us all to step into the conversation. It's easy to observe and to feel like you're on the outside of a story, but to step into the middle of it and find your own voice and find your inspiration within that story.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful. Along the lines of process and design, I want to turn to you, JoAnna. With your students, you use something called project-based learning. I want you to tell us a little bit about that. And as a former educator, I know it can be quite challenging at times, so I want to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yes, I remember just a few minutes ago, or I guess it was this morning, when I heard the conversation about a problem becoming an opportunity for a solution. And so that's what project-based learning, that's another tenet of the, I guess we'd say a pillar of Furlow Charter School, is to use project-based learning. So when I heard that there was the National Museum and Center for Service, I did meet resistance. And then I learned to respond to the resistance, not to react to it. and that I was able to seek out partners in the community who would make this possible for the students. And I think that was a very important piece to getting started. If we know anything about implementation barriers, we know that we have to move from helping it happen to making it happen. And that's what the students did with this process. So we had sustained inquiry, we had all the pieces of project-based learning, we had opportunities for students K-12 to, they were interviewing people, they were interviewing family members. They were asking to participate in a dedication ceremony. So we had younger kids who were preparing song because that was their gift to the Carter family and to the other two recipients of the exhibits. Students in middle school turned their project-based learning unit of science into a butterfly activity. And so what we had was a convergence of disciplines. It was a creation of something new. And literacy was at the heart of it. Literacy was at the heart of it. And so what we had was an equitable access to text that became an equitable access to achievement. And I think that was one of the things that was most powerful. We are in rural Georgia. And so I'm going to say a lot of wonderful things about Furlow Charter, but also Chattahoochee Flint RESA works with amazing school systems. These are schools that are diverse. Furlow has over 10 languages spoken in the school, in size 600 kids, K-12. And so they were able to give their student voice and their choice in how to proceed with this. And I think that makes it a viable product, sustainable, but also it is portable. We know now that it will fit in the overhead compartment of an airplane to fly from South Georgia. We were crossing some fingers there. But all of those pieces come together and the students are elevated. And that's the purpose of all of this is student achievement.
I love that. I love that answer. I love the focus on students and that it's student driven and they connect to it. I wanted to ask you, Addison, super quick about the service credit part of your project.
So, at Furlow Charter School, to graduate high school, you're required to have 2 credits of service learning. And for me, that was 2 credits of over 60 hours of service. And I dedicated that to my garden project. And I think that part of service learning is really important because I have like a physical evidence of my project that the rest of the school can see and be inspired by. And that's important. Like kids need to see themselves in other students to be able to know they can do it themselves.
I can't think of a better way to say it, Addison. That is so, so true and so relevant and so meaningful in terms of bringing this to communities and to young people. So thank you for that. Deborah March, my question for you. So if you look at the amazing toolkits, the inspirational toolkits that Deborah put together, you'll notice that very thoughtfully she has an English version and then a Spanish version. So my question is twofold. One, why did you do that? And 2, what did that mean to your students?
Thank you for this question. My students specifically asked me to talk about this. They're all taking the PSAT today, so they couldn't be here, but they were like, talk about language. Yeah, I mean, Lewis High School is a majority Hispanic Latinx school, so that's an easy answer. We developed these resources. Everything you see in the toolkit was developed by students and staff and pilot tested over 2 years, which is like we're in our 3rd year of the program. But I think there's a bigger answer, and it connects to what Addison was just sharing. I think when we invite learners to bring their whole selves to the service projects that they design, the impact is amplified by the authenticity of the intent and the understanding. And so, yeah, there are like multiple layers to this, right? Like our service projects at Lewis connect us to the community. Now, how are we going to invite our community in and exhibit our service projects and give them a story of service learning that is English only? What does that say to our community about who serves and who is served? And I think, despite all of the important work that so many organizations have done around service, some folks, some of us still bring a narrow story of who is served and who does the serving. And my students are disrupting that, and language is one of the important ways that they do that. I think also, service exhibitions honor the process of service, right? We were just kind of talking about this. And that process is deeply personal. And to ask somebody to reflect on their values and their growth and their shifts in understanding, and to have to do it in a language that they are in the process of learning, I think we really impoverish what can be said, what can be understood. So that part has been really important. And some of our service projects have to do with language. Like one of the most powerful ones, a group of our newcomer students who were just new to my class, 3 weeks arrived in this country, designed a community building routine that all teachers in the building could use to welcome newcomers. And so this is something students can lead. So, I wanted to offer that example just because Addison's project is amazing. And for some students hearing it, it's like, oh, I gotta build a whole garden. And it can be as simple as designing a welcoming routine based on your own experience to make sure that all students in the building experience belonging. And you had a second part to your question, but I just went off. I'm sorry. What was the second part?
No, I think you actually answered it. It was what did it mean to your students that you made that possible?
So I guess one last thing I would say is we host 2 exhibitions of learning per year. And if it was easy for you to come here today, it will be moderately easy for you to come join us on November 8th if you'd like, and also in the spring. And when you come, if you would have come on April 15th, like some of you did, you would have seen 2 of our students, Esther and Camila, welcoming everybody in Spanish and in English. You would see families, you would see elected officials, and you would see students standing next to their trifolds, kind of a science fair vibe. And some of those trifolds would be in English and some would be in the students' home language. And the students would proudly be standing there sharing their impact and their growth with anybody who walked by. And I think, the opportunity to share that in their chosen language is a collective statement of our values. And what is a service exhibition if not a collective statement of the world that we hope to see?
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I want to kind of follow that up with impact, right? We always talk about impact. So, what is the impact? And Addison, what do you think the impact was of you creating that butterfly garden, of you honoring Rosalind Carter? What do you think the impact on your school and on yourself? How would you describe that?
Well, so I put the butterfly garden in our existing peace garden. And I think the idea of environmental sustainability and peace united through this project. And now the garden is used by classes or when we host community events. And I think the community is involved in this and they can see the information in our garden and know that it's something that matters to the students at our school.
Fantastic. And JoAnna, would you like to follow that up with what you saw the impact from an educator standpoint?
Yes, I think Furlow students have really learned to articulate what I consider to be one of the most important pieces of service learning. That is understanding the importance of to ask someone or to address the cause, how can I help? Rather than responding or reacting with this idea of I want to help the way I want to help. And so through the garden projects, all of our seniors have capstones. This service learning runs K-12, but when you look at the exhibits that are located upstairs, you will see the first one was dedicated to Rosalind Smith Carter because she and former President Jimmy Carter are part of Sumter County and what a legacy that they have given our community. But the second and third exhibits were donated, or excuse me, they were brought, the kids brought these ideas to me and they said, we want to recognize the chief of police for Americus, Mark Scott, and we want to acknowledge the work that the sheriff, Eric Bryant, has been doing because they were coming into the school and working with the children on youth gun violence prevention. So when it goes back to talking about student voice and student choice, the community members are rallying around the kids. They are addressing youth gun violence in Sumter County. And on November 15th, we will bring all of the students from the county into Georgia Southwestern State University for a symposium, but for an opportunity for the students to propose their peace projects, their service projects, and to get to know each other. But those two men have poured into the students. And so what we found was the intersection of the Museum for Service in Sumter with youth gun violence prevention.
It's amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And Deborah, how about the impact on your students? What have you seen or noticed since you've started doing this?
I mean, the opportunity to be of service to your community really changes your sense of who you are and your relationship to your school and your community. And now that I'm going to my third year, so I've seen some students now, who were freshmen, now juniors. One student, Zane, is a senior because she skipped. And so I think about, somebody like Caitlin, I'm going to do some shout outs. Is that okay? But like somebody like Caitlin, who like in year one, like she was interested in just capturing the oral history of her mom, who, as an immigrant, in her childhood, had an undiagnosed learning disability and struggled. And Caitlin was interested in this because she herself has a disability, and she wanted to. So anyway, I know an amazing professor, Wendy Manuel Scott, over at George Mason University, who taught Caitlin and a few other students oral history skills, web publishing skills. It grew into this big project called Our Stories Matter. If you want to come see my trifold later, I'll happily show you and brag about my kids. But it grew out of, one student's desire to capture her family's story. And it became an opportunity for students in Lewis High School to disrupt the narrative of Springfield, Virginia, by lifting up stories that maybe wouldn't be published in textbooks, that maybe wouldn't be documented in official records. But now any researcher in the world can go to their story map and learn this diverse student-authored story of our community. And that interest in disability sparked something larger. Because this interest was there, our community partners connected us with the National Caravan for Disability, Freedom, and Justice. And they made us a stop on their caravan this year. So on September 9th, I think we might be the only school stop, the only student-run stop also, not to brag. And so, disability rights activists, people who've been doing this work for 40 years came to our school. Caitlin grabbed the microphone, welcomed everybody. Ooh, and we followed the caravan to the steps of the U.S. Capitol to commemorate the Capitol crawl. We heard from people, one person in particular, who had the experience of dragging her body up those stairs to protest for accessibility.
And Caitlin was there, right? Along with 20 other students. And so, when you talk about impact, I think about how, like, starting small, listening to students, giving them the space to try something new, and then giving them the space to share that story, it can spark something really, really life-changing. That's so incredible and so inspiring to hear. And there's just so much more that we could continue to talk about, because your stories, each one, I'm getting chills listening to. But we have to kind of bring this conversation to a close, at least for now. But it can be a conversation, hopefully, that's carried on afterwards. And I want to wrap it up with final thoughts. So, Patrick, I'm going to start with you. And just, what is one piece of advice that you would give somebody about creating a service exhibit, honoring and inspiring service? One thing you would leave them with, or maybe a challenge that you face that you want to, give some advice on.
So, as you've heard here, it's very much about process, and to create an empowering process that offers inspiration and joy and an opportunity to tell stories from the heart. I think we keep coming back to that, to create an audience experience that really gives our audiences the tools to find meaning. We have to find meaning ourselves. That's why I was saying, like with Congressman Baird's inspiration about, there's a big vision here, how a new museum will be represented in the nation's capital, but will reach out to communities all across the United States. And at those libraries, at those visitor centers, there's a local conversation that is really authentic and driven by our love for each other, our craving for a connection. That's what I'm hearing in all of these project stories. That is so essential, because as far as the process goes, in our work, there are certainly linear, concrete threads, but we remind ourselves constantly that this is an interpretive art form. We don't necessarily, we need to discover that process and allow it that push and pull, allow it to be authentic and allow it to be inspired, but then also, delivered on budget and on time and have a concrete a product at the end that serves the audience. So it's always going to be that balance. And my advice to communities telling stories and challenging us all to serve the way we really want to, and would be just to let that process unfold in the most organic way while being responsible to the concrete needs of the project. But
Fantastic.
It's always going to come back to the authenticity of those voices and the inspiration behind that.
And the process, you're
Yeah.
right. The process is so important. And that's what I'm hearing from JoAnna, from Addison, from Deborah, and yourself, that's half of it is it's how you allow voices to be heard and bring people together. Deborah, what is your final parting thought?
Well, I think I would just echo honor the process, and for educators in the audience or in the Zoom, like save everything. So I really mean it, because that process, those artifacts are really crucial to empowering folks to tell their story in their own way. And so I print probably like 1,000 photographs a year. I'm using my school's color printer. Don't tell my principal. I'm just kidding. The principal's very supportive. But no, having those photos, those journals, the Post-it notes that kids, Project Zero thinking routines. If you don't know what they are, definitely Google that. But really powerful tools for reflection. I used to think, but now I think, and saving all of those artifacts really allows the young person to be the author of their story. You never know what was the moment in their journey that made that difference, not only for others in the act of service, but in their own understanding of themselves and the world. So the more that you can have really the tools that you're giving the students to tell a personalized story.
Great advice. That is great advice. Addison, what advice do you have for all of us?
From a youth perspective, I think before you can start the process, it's important to educate everyone on exactly what service means or could mean. I think that's probably my most important piece of information.
So important and so useful because people may think differently of what service means. So that's really, really important. JoAnna, I'm going to let you bring it home. What's your last piece of advice?
Well, I think back to what I was saying in the beginning, that I finished up when I was in Franklin, Tennessee. I finished up and I made many, many, many steps over to Congressman Baird's area where he was presenting. And I think it was, that initial decision to move from helping it happen to making it happen. I think that's now our call to action, is for teachers to take the step of yes into doing these activities. It's for the community members. Rotary has been an incredible, incredible partner with us. Also, Global Graphics. We had graphic designers that were working to design everything. But it's a step of yes that you have to take. You have to take the no's. You have to take the resistance. But you also have to be ready when people say okay. And that's what I am most grateful for. When I met you, when I met Julie, when I met Congressman Baird, Michael somewhere, everybody was so gracious and willing and excited. And I think that's what our teachers need. Our students need people who are going to be gracious and are going to listen to them, and who are willing to take a step of yes out of their comfort zone a little bit, like today. But all in all, I think we have a wonderful opportunity to provide our students a chance to express themselves, their voice. When we're going to build their capacity to understand their strengths, and they're going to meet an identified need. But we also need to be there to remind them to ask, how can I help?
Beautiful.
What can I do?
That is a beautiful way to end this panel. Thank you for your wisdom, your insight, your passion, your enthusiasm, and for bringing service to the forefront in your world. So thank you so much.